Warheads Sour Peach Soda. Is it any good? I wonder. Well, my friend Scott Barnes and myself will be trying it out today on Wide World of Soda. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
Good, thank you. I guess I should have mentioned that we're talking about James Bond movies as well.
There you go. That's all right.
All right. Well, let's not dilly-dally. You got your soda handy?
I've got it.
I've been, what have we had this for about a month? We've been hanging on these sodas.
Yeah, well, it came from a dollar store, so who knows how long it's been around.
That's right. So we'll
Well,
find out right now.
I have my mug.
Nice. You're kind of a purist, and I totally appreciate that it goes into a different receptacle for drinking. I'm going to drink it right out of the can, though.
It's pretty clear. I mean, it's not as dark as I might have imagined.
Yep.
A little less food coloring,
Okay.
maybe. Red dye number 5 that's no longer, or is it 40? Which one's no longer allowed?
I don't know.
I can't read that. My eyes are no good. That is not bad. It's got some good peach flavor to it.
I'm fine with the peach flavor. I'm struggling with the sour part.
Oh, mine isn't sour yet.
Well, mine, each swallow has a bit of a sour taste to it.
Yeah, there you go.
It
Right
isn't,
at the tail end.
it isn't horrible. I'm still going to drink it. So that's
Well, it does say sour on the can.
right. We knew what we were getting into.
That's actually not bad. Not bad at all.
Here's what I think. I think I would not buy it again, but it isn't bad. It isn't bad. This is in no way a reflection on the product. I think for like kids and maybe even teenagers, it's probably a lot of fun. But I don't know if that would be my go-to soda. Would it be your go-to soda?
No. My go-to is always Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke.
What does it remind you?
Zero.
What does it remind you of?
It reminds me of almost like a Sour Patch Kids candy.
Yeah.
It's got a very candy flavor to it.
You know what it reminds me of a little bit is, and this is stepping away from soda, but there's been these moments where I've tried to take a little bit of apple cider vinegar every day because of the supposed health benefits.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of that, swigging down a mix of apple cider vinegar and water.
I think you got the more sour one. Either that or this head cold I have is blocking those taste receptors because I'm not getting a ton of sour.
You're not getting that, huh?
Uh-uh.
Yeah, I'm getting it.
Not quite like a Jolly Rancher, but something along those veins.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sweet. It delivers. It delivers on its promise.
Not bad.
If you're looking for something different, a little soury, or if you just want something fun to buy for the kids or the grandkids, watch their faces pucker up if they don't have a cold, I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I would recommend it as well.
Okay. All right. So we got the main business, the primary business of Wide World of Soda is out of the way. Our soda review is taken care of. Before we jump into James Bond movies, Scott, I got to say there was a comment that came, I think it was yesterday or the day before, from April Carver, YouTube handle name April Carver 33. And she said, I couldn't believe this. She said, well, I can believe it, but it was so neat to see in comment form. She says, I was so excited to see Scott Barnes, ! I first watched YouTube back in 2018. What is that? 7 years ago, April. We go that far back, April. That's what got me really started watching this channel. I had fun. Thank you. Thank you, April.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's amazing and humbling as well.
Yeah, very cool.
We had a lot of fun back then going to Rocket Fizz and walking around the Gateway Mall and those kind of things.
We sure did. Now, I understand Rocket Fizz's move, so we have to at some point make a trip up to, what is that mall called?
Crossroads?
No. Across the street.
I
Come on.
know.
The LDS Church owns it.
City
Uh,
Creek, yeah.
City Creek Mall. We have to make a trip up there. I've also heard, in terms of getting weird sodas to try, what's the name of that? Cracker Barrel. Cracker
Yeah.
Barrel restaurant has some unique soda flavors there that we could pick up too. And I'm close to one of those. So
And Trader Joe's as well is what I've heard. So
yeah, places to go check out. All right. James Bond movies. So the reason we're doing this is I think when we were brainstorming about Bond movies, you were in the middle of your annual, what do you call it? An annual Bond pilgrimage. Tell us a little bit about that, Scott.
So every year with my kids growing up, I'm a huge James Bond fan. I've owned them all on VHS and now DVD, and now I own them all digitally as well. So every year we would play the movies. So we wouldn't necessarily sit down and watch them start to finish every single one. We put the movies on. Sometimes we would be doing things as a family, cooking dinner, those kind of things. But we would start with Dr. No and run it all the way through to whatever was out at the time. So this year I finished up with No Time to Die, the last one. Often we have skipped the two non Albert Brock productions, but in other years I own them. I own Casino Royale, the one with David Niven, and also Never Say Never Again, Sean Connery's reboot of Thunderball. I own them both, and often we would watch them, but sometimes we'd skip them, other times we wouldn't. So
I can see skipping Casino Royale. No, that's a one and done for me. But I really like Never Say Never Again.
It's probably better than Thunderball, other than you don't get the Bond references. So there's no Q, there's no M. Those were all kind of owned by Eon Productions and Broccoli, but it's still Connery playing Bond. So you can't go wrong there.
You cannot go wrong with an aged Sean Connery playing Bond one more time with the lovely Kim Basinger along for the ride. Good stuff. Good stuff. So we've already talked about one Bond movie, but let's see where this conversation takes us as we talk about different things, such as who's your favorite Bond, Scott?
It's such a hard thing because I like them all for very different reasons, right? Sean Connery's the iconic. Roger Moore is probably my favorite, simply because that's when I started watching them as a kid. And so that was my introduction to Bond, was with Roger Moore. So he's probably my favorite, but George Lazenby did a great job. Pierce Brosnan did an awesome job. Timothy Dalton, I think, got snubbed because he did an excellent James Bond. And then Daniel Craig just put the icing on the top. But if I had to pick one, probably Roger Moore.
You noticed I didn't say who was the best James Bond. I said, who was your favorite?
Right.
And that's because the answer is exactly the same. And it's because that's when I started watching James Bond movies, was during that era of Roger Moore.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed him in the role. And I did go back and watch the Sean Connery Bonds, but there will always be, and I do believe that Connery was fantastic. Whether he was the best Bond or not, I don't know. But my favorite James Bond is going to be Roger Moore as well, just because that's when I fell in love with the James Bond movies.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree.
So what about Bond villains?
Oh, Bond villains. It's
Or henchmen. It can be henchmen too.
I think my favorite henchman is Oddjob, but my favorite villain, boy, that is a hard one because, you've got them all the way from just unbelievably sinister, like in No Time to Die, just completely just a total sociopath, to, they're all kind of sociopaths. They're all out to, as we learned in Animaniacs, I'm going to try and take over the world.
Nice Pinky in the Brain reference.
Yes, Pinky in the Brain. But I would have to say probably my favorite villain, because some of them were just silly, right? So if you go to Tomorrow Never Dies, come on, a newspaper magnet, I, no, but it would have to be some of the Roger Moore era villains, right? So I'm going to mispronounce his name, but in Live and Let Die, you had, is it Yafket Kodo? I'm slaughtering it, but he played a wonderful villain because he played two people, right? Played two different people. And, he was a Caribbean dictator, but, he was so much more. And he was very charismatic as a character. So, but then there's also the henchman in that one, Baron Sabity, right?
Right.
Who was described as being 9 feet tall. And his voice, boy, he had the pipes. You could get down low. So anyway, that's still probably my favorite would be him.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to go. The reason I said henchman is because my favorite, the great Richard Kiel as Jaws. I love Jaws.
Oh, you know what? I may have to change my vote.
And I'm also, because I was a big Fantasy Island fan, big
Mhm.
classic TV nut. Nick Dan.
Yeah, Hervé.
By Hervé Villechaize. It was great too. There's so many good ones. And yeah, you're right. The main villains, who I kind of liked was Telly Savalas. Blofeld, right?
Blofeld, yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Telly Savalas was good. And he wasn't the first to play Blofeld, but he was great. Let's go to favorite Bond girl. Who was your favorite Bond girl?
and this is another hard one too, because there were so many great ones, but I'm going to have to go with one of the repeating ones in Maude Adams.
Yes.
Because she was the Bond girl, so to speak, in The Man with the Golden Gun. And then she came back as the lead, almost the villain, the pseudo villain.
Almost the villain.
Yeah. In Octopussy. But she portrayed both very, very well. And so I would have to go with Maude Adams. Although, how do you not go Ursula Andress? There's just so many to choose from because they were all good. But almost all.
Don't disagree with any of those, and I can see why they'd be your favorites. Certainly did enjoy Maude in both roles. But for me, it's Jane Seymour as Solitaire. Love her in that movie. She was just so good. And she has said, by the way, that she would be willing to come back and play an older Solitaire at some point. We're ever able to somehow work it in. I don't see it happening, but the fact that she has been publicly telling people that she would be willing to come back and do that role one more time is awesome. She was so good.
That was one of her first roles, wasn't it?
Right. It was absolutely one of her first roles, feature film roles. I think she had done a couple of things on TV and done some commercials, but yeah, she was great in that.
And she still looks great.
She does. She does.
She looks
great. She looks great. She looks fantastic. Now, you mentioned Lazenby. When we were talking about Bonds, you mentioned Lazenby. I like talking about George because that was one of the first Bond movies I saw. I saw it on TV, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And there's a lot of reasons I like that movie. One is Diana Rigg is fantastic in that movie.
Yes, she is.
The ending is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Bond is played by an Australian. And the irony there is that prior to them hiring Lazenby, Cubby Broccoli had dinner with Adam West, one of my favorite all-time actors, Batman himself, and had thrown out on the table the idea of Adam taking over for Connery. And Adam said, got to be an Englishman. It's got to be an Englishman. I'd love to do it, but it's got to be an Englishman. At that time, the end of the 60s, the three most popular things in pop culture were the Beatles, James Bond, and Batman. And so it was a natural to bring Adam West on over and to fill Connery's shoes. But he turned it down, or, it was an informal offer. It was never formalized, but he turned it down and it went to Lazenby. What did you think of Lazenby?
I thought he was great. And I'm sad that they didn't do more with him. And I understand why they didn't. I mean, he drank his own Kool-Aid, right?
Right.
He bought into the hype, thought he was more
Yep.
more than he was, and it got away from him, unfortunately. But I, yeah, I always wish they'd have done more with him. You had Sean Connery up to that point playing it very serious, right?
Right.
And George Lazenby comes in and he breaks the fourth wall, and he stares at the camera, and he literally says, "This didn't happen to the other fella," as he looks at the camera because the girl got away, right? So
Right.
Diana Riggs takes off. But I wish they'd have done more with him.
Yeah.
The movie itself isn't in my top 10 simply because it's too long,
Yeah.
right? It's almost 2.5 hours. And
Yeah.
for the time, that was unheard of. And there are places where they could have easily pared it back,
Yeah.
right? And made it shorter. And it just doesn't seem to flow very well. But other than that, it's still really good. And I really, really wish that he'd done more.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Drank his own Kool-Aid, started to believe what everybody was telling him, became a little too difficult, perceived to work with. And Sean Connery comes back for Diamonds Are Forever. So
Yep.
there you go. Let's talk about, for a minute, the latest series. So I hadn't realized that Daniel Craig to me, it always felt like he'd done fewer movies
Hmm.
than Connery and Roger Moore, but that's not the case. He's done 5 Bond movies, and I think that equals Connery. Has Moore done 5? Did Moore do 5? He did, right? Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So he's equal to both Connery and Moore. I agree with you that Dalton got the short end of the stick, but what are your thoughts about this latest series? And as someone who's the only one I've watched in the latest series was Casino Royale, and I think I did see Spectre, but it's been a while, a very long time.
So it was interesting when Daniel Craig was introduced. It was like, ooh, blonde haired, blue eyed Bond, right? And you don't see this from the beginning. And I don't know if it was intended this way or not, but there is an arc to his stories where he takes you from the beginning, Casino Royale, kind of the first Bond, right? Even though Dr. No was the first, Casino Royale was, I think, Ian Fleming's first book,
I believe you are correct.
but then taking the arc all the way through the character. And all throughout his movies, there are homages and throwbacks and Easter eggs to all of the other 20 Bonds. So I love the arc. I love it as a group. I think Daniel Craig did a great job because there was some pendulum swing in the character, right? Sean Connery played it very tough and gruff. And George Lazenby softened it up a bit, had a little humor. Roger Moore was almost campy, right?
Yeah. From at
And
times.
And then you bring in Timothy Dalton, who takes it back to the hardcore Sean Connery. And people were like, no, Roger Moore was calmer than that. So now you bring in Pierce Brosnan, who brings back campy. And now you finally come back to Daniel Craig, who brings a depth to the character. He's not a shallow, misogynistic womanizer. There's a person behind all of this, and you get to see the whole arc of it. So I'm a big fan of the last group of movies.
You've inspired me to go back and watch all 5 of those. We got to start at the beginning. My memory's so bad these days that I got to.
I have the Blu-rays if you want to borrow them.
I may indeed borrow them from you. Okay, so clearly you're a fan of Daniel Craig, and even though he's not your favorite, it sounds to me like he's up there in the running for possibly best Bond.
I think he is. I think he's probably best Bond,
Gotcha.
in my opinion, just because of the story arc.
Yeah, I totally get that. So where do they go from here? Who do you want to see be the? We know Craig's not going to be Bond again.
Right.
Who do you want to see be the new James Bond, new 007?
I'm all over the place on this. Henry Cavill would be awesome. Idris Elba would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wide open here, right? To whoever it is, not to sound sexist or anything, but I think it has to be a gentleman, right? Even though, and I love the reference in No Time to Die where there is a female 007 and James Bond says, it's just a number.
Right.
That I get totally fine. But James Bond is James Bond. Whoever 007 is doesn't matter. James Bond is James Bond.
I tend to agree with you. I know that there seems to be, these days, Hollywood seems to be in love with the idea of gender swapping a lot. And I've heard whispers that Margot Robbie might be approached to be a Jamie Bond or something like that. But I agree with you. Let's do Bond the way that Ian Fleming intended, which is James Bond's a guy. He's a dude.
Yeah.
And if there's another 007 out there, cool. That can be an equally capable female secret agent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love it. Love it. Well, Scott, this has been a lot of fun talking about James Bond. And yeah, Warheads Soda. I feel like I gave it the short end of the stick because it is delivering upon its promise of being sour, at least for me.
So
It's pretty good. I guess I'm going to recommend it because it delivers on the promise. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, it does say Warhead on it. It does say sour. And it certainly has the peach. For me, not as much of the sour, but it's good.
Yeah.
I would drink another one.
All right. There you go. Thanks for joining me, Scott. And thank you to everybody out there hanging out with us today. We'll talk to you all soon.
You didn't have to do it, but you did. So thank you very much for your support, for your support, for your support. Thank you very much. Click on that thumbnail cause it's time to go. Dave's got the classics, let the memories flow. TV shows and movies that we all hold so dear. On his YouTube channel he's keeping memories near. Dave Sundstrom, bringing back the good stuff, oh yeah.